Hello, everyone. We are back in the main studio. And as you see, I started to speak in English. That's the reason is that we will have Ken Beck right now, and the discussion, which will start soon, will be in English as well. But don't hesitate to ask your questions in Telegram chat and use all the communication channels we provided to you. And right now, I'm pleased to announce that we are starting the discussion called Transform with VTB, TCR for Big Enterprise. And this discussion is running with big support from our partner, VTB Bank. And we kind of really ready to say hello to our special guest, Ken Beck. Kent is living a legend of the IT world. Actually, he created an idea of unit testing framework. I believe you already heard about that. It was first used as a basis for S-unit and then for J-unit. Created the extreme programming methodology. I guess one of you at least using that in the regular job. At least me, yeah, I'm using that. He was one of the specialists who signed the Agile Manifesto back in 2001. He is a task-driven development popularizer, and he's one of the first people who started using software design patterns in many more ways. And our experts are Alexey Baryshev, Stanislav Ivanov from VTB Bank, and Vladimir Sitnikov, who is a performance engineer, ready to go. Hello, folks. We are on air. Really glad to see everyone here. I guess we do have a very wide geography right now. Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kirov, and San Francisco. Really cool to be online with you guys.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak to your conference.
Yeah, it's really cool to have you here, Kent, and yeah, you guys really wait for the discussion, which is really happening right now on this interesting topic. Vladimir,
So,
yeah.
Just a quick question to you. Please be real honest. Do you know what TCR is?
Yes.
You caught me. You caught me. I'm the one who doesn't know about it, or at least I'm just trying. I will Google it for you, so it's not. It's a big shame for me, right?
No. This is a relatively new idea. Vladimir, do you want me to explain, or do you want to, one of you have an explanation?
No, not really. Can I just do it real quick?
Okay. So we'll start the story with test-driven development, which is this kind of crazy idea. Usually people think I'm going to write a program and then I'm going to write a test that will either succeed or fail if I wrote my program correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good idea. The people downstream of that workflow get to have software that works more reliably. So I had this crazy idea, and it's a long story, but I want to hear your guys' experiences too. So the crazy idea was, what if we wrote the test before we wrote the code? And it's a stupid idea because if you write the test before you write the code, you're guaranteed that the test is going to fail. And the goal is to have a test that succeeds. So why would you start with failure on purpose? So that's test-driven development. I write one test, I make it work. I write another test, I make it work. I write another test, I make it work. And when I can't think of any more tests, then I'm finished. And I have these tests left behind as a way of recording my thoughts. You know, that moment when you look at some code and you think, what was the programmer thinking? The tests are a record of what the programmer was thinking. So for reasons we'll get into, test-driven development does a good job of helping reduce anxiety while programming. So it's a little like taking the medications to reduce anxiety, but you don't have all the side effects. So that was 1995. I suppose some of you were born then, but anyway.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, I was giving a code camp at my partner Iterate in Oslo, and I told one of the students about a new workflow I'd been playing with, where every time you run the tests, you do a git commit if the tests pass. And the idea here is that you want to get back to a known state quickly. So, you're running some code and you're like, oh, this is broken. What all did I change? How did I break it? I couldn't possibly have broken it. I didn't change anything. Of course, you changed something. So the idea of this, so in the shell command, you say test and commit. So you run the tests. If they pass, you're going to commit. And my student said, well, if we commit when the tests pass, then by symmetry, we need to revert when the tests fail. And I thought, this is a terrible idea. Let's try it. So that's why it's called test, commit, revert. Test and commit or revert. Now Git calls revert reset, so we don't worry about that. But the idea is I'm going to run the tests. Every time I save a file, I'm going to run the tests. If they pass, I'm going to make a commit. And if they fail, I'm going to immediately revert to what the code looked like the last time the tests passed. So how it feels is type. Okay, this should work. Save. Poof. All the changes I made just disappear. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Can you say?
Yeah. all
Is
right,
this a cussing conference or not a cussing conference?
it's casting, but yeah, it's totally fine. Looks like
Okay.
I got it. Then, folks, I will leave you and for this discussion. But yeah, thanks, Ken, for this detailed explanation what it is about. All right, see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Hey,
I wasn't sure exactly how much detail he wanted. So I'm a geek. As soon as I start explaining stuff, I get really excited. So here we are.
Yes,
So
it's pretty good.
that's TCR, test, commit, revert. It feels a little bit like test-driven development, but there are ways in which it's looser. Because sometimes you write some code, but you don't have a test for it. No tests fail, the code commits, and now you write a test for it. And then sometimes you do write a test first, and then you have to write enough implementation for the test to pass, even if the implementation is just kind of fake. So there's ways it's looser than TDD, and there's ways that it's much more restrictive because all your changes just poof, disappear if you make any mistakes. So have you all tried this so far?
That depends.
Okay.
My like a key project for now is say PLSQL procedure or set of procedures and the database, which is kind of tricky to get really done because, well, you need to spin up a database, you need to populate it with schemas, procedures, things like that. It takes a while, like a couple of minutes at least, to set up the whole thing. And if you just revert it, it would be really sad. So I haven't really tried it. But
okay. So this is a good point. It would be really sad. Here's the surprising emotional impact of TCR. At first, I would get really angry. Like, I know I didn't make any mistakes. What are you deleting my code? And of course I made a mistake or the test would have passed. And then after a while, though, I started relying on it. I just change some comments and I go, well, save. That's for sure fine. Oh, okay, now I feel good again. And then I program a little while and I'm feeling a little unsure, I just press save. And if everything disappears, then I made a mistake. Oh, but now I know exactly where I am. I can look at the error messages. I can try doing things again a little different way, working in smaller steps. So that's test-driven development helps you work in smaller steps because you want to write one test and make it work and another test and make it work. TCR, even inside of that cycle, you have many more moments to have feedback.
Okay, Kent, thank you for your explanation. Colleagues, I need to remind that we need to follow our discussion in short portions because we lack of time. You know, let's try to do it. Let me start my question. So, as you all know, big enterprise is really conservative with new practices. But in our bank, we are really open for improving our business processes and technical skills because we have very strong competitors. So from the other hand, we need stability for our clients and for our company. And when we need to introduce new technology or changes in our regular delivery process, we need to introduce it to different levels of management. So we need to get approvals. In small company, it's more easy. It's not so really complicated. You just open the door to your technical director and say, hey, we have a good idea. Let's try it. He can tell you, okay, no problem, just do it. But in our case, we need to explain and maybe some kind of, we need to sell it for our management. How we need to provide, in this case, any measurable arguments. For example, how much time or money we can potentially save for our processes and so on. Kent, maybe you know any case or any existing examples in big company, preferably maybe from bank or financial corporation, when they introduced TCR and it used successfully, or for example, for any kind of big project and big team?
Thank you, Alexey. So the short answer is no. I don't have any data to support this. This is an experiment. It's a crazy idea. It couldn't possibly work. But if it does work, it's really interesting. So when I've been involved in introducing two handfuls of development practices. When I hear the argument, we don't want to try it until we're sure that it will work, that has always turned out to be an excuse for, yeah, I don't want to try something new. And
Yeah,
so when I'm asked for that kind of, well, prove it before you start, prove it. Well, if we were talking about a new investment vehicle, here's a bond. We want you to buy 100 million rubles of this bond. You can reasonably ask, well, you know, what's the yield on the bond and what are the alternatives and what else can I do? And you can quantify all those numbers. When we talk about software development, we're talking about a human enterprise. And the effects on the people are subtle and complicated. And in that kind of regime, it's not like buying a bond or not buying a bond, which is a pretty objective decision. No, this is more like, well, what if we change the arrangement of the furniture? Well, prove. What's the ROI of better chairs? It's the wrong question. This is something where your only choice is to try it out and see. the big barrier for TCR, as with all of extreme programming, is the length of feedback loops. That teams get used to, I want to run some tests and now I have to wait for a minute or 10 minutes or an hour or 10 hours before I get feedback from the tests. And that's always a mistake. That's what I'm going to focus on in my presentation in a few minutes, is that delay. So I would say that sounds like an excuse to me. Does your managing director really care whether you write the test before the code or the code before the test? I don't know.
Actually, we have different management, so some of them really fall into details and they can understand you. But you know that you have to pass a lot of any other levels, and these people may not be so technical as previous, and they understand only numbers, something measurable. So thank you for your answer. I think I understand how to do it and how to try to introduce it. I think we can start with one or few small teams, and if we get brilliant results, we can provide our feedback and collect needed all measurables, I think. So my second question is related to your answer. When you spoke about different team members and their experience. As you know, a big team has some difference in skills, experience. So some developers really want and able to use some techniques, for example, TDD or even TCR, but we have novices, for example, to do some routine, and is it will be an obstacle to start TCR as common practice for whole team, or maybe you can recommend to do it partially? What do you think?
Well, I think starting with one or two people makes a lot of sense. I think if you expect it to become a habit for everyone eventually will have to get used to it. And that's because it's so sensitive to the length of the test cycle. So if you have a long test cycle, TCR is just, it feels awful. You know, you program for 30 seconds and then you wait 10 minutes for the tests to come back. You're not going to do that. You're just going to keep writing some more code and some more code and some more code. You're still making mistakes at the same rate. You're just piling them one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, because your tests take so long. So I would guess that if a team wasn't all doing TCR together, the people who were doing TCR would be very frustrated, and the people who weren't using it would just be like, okay, yeah, this test takes a minute and a half to run. Who cares? Go get a coffee.
By the way, what do you think is the right test feedback duration for applying TCR?
1 second.
So if tests take longer than 1 second, then TCR is not to be discussed, right?
It gets annoying, yeah. It's not black and white.
I mean, a second and a half is okay, right? But
yeah, but a minute's not.
Does that mean we should try to, I don't know, identify fast tests versus long tests and just skip long tests? Or should we try to compress all the tests to make it fit in 1 second?
Now you're getting to, you're trying to get me to give my talk before I give my talk. I'm not going to do that.
Okay. Good.
I would say it's sensitive to testing latency. That's my message for today, and it's not something that testing tool providers have paid any attention to. So more later.
Okay. So the takeaway so far is we need to have some tests, and the test should pass in a second. Then we might try TCR to see how it goes.
Yeah, and nobody's ever really tried to see how much testing they can get done in a second. Everybody tries to see how many tests they can run per unit time. I'm getting into my talk.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Stas, maybe you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Hello, Kent. I think you ask on my questions when you ask on previous questions. But if we have enough fast test, can we expand our T-part tests another from bigger than unit test? Can we use API? I think we can make UI end-to-end testing so fast, but API we can additional in this part, or it's a bad practice.
Well, there's a trade-off. This is the international symbol for trade-off. I'm trying to introduce it. There's an emoji that looks kind of like this, so I'm already making progress. So there's a trade-off between coverage, the cost of having tests be more predictive. So let's say we have end-to-end tests, and now we have more confidence that the whole system works. And the cost of delay on the other side for the tests. And you've got this trade-off, and we all live at some space between those two. Yes, you can always write more tests, but eventually you run out of time to take naps while you're running the tests. So that's where you end up. And what I want to do is open up the possibility that we can change the shape of those curves so that we can get much more coverage in the same amount of time or electrons or however you want to measure that. So there's a trade-off space there. You're going to have to figure out, I mean, you already are figuring out where in that trade-off space you want to live. Your team wants to live, your whole organization wants to live. And it's the cost of delay versus the cost of the mistakes that get through. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Kent. And another TCR, it's instrument for make working code, but not instrument for make good quality code. It's similar, but some different. Which methods and instrument we can additional to TCR to make a really good quality code, as you think?
So this is one of the advantages of writing the test first, is that you use the API before you implement it. So when I was a wee little programmer, I was taught to separate logical and physical design. And I said, let me write that down. How the hell do you do that? I have no idea, but I have it written down. I know that I should separate the two. Test-driven development is a way, writing tests first is a way to separate logical and physical design, because you're forced to say, here's how I want to invoke this logic. Okay, the logic computes the net present value of blah, 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 whatever. But the way I want to invoke it is I create this object and I send these messages and it's a fluent design, or it's a pure functional, or it's this, or I have a constructor versus having a factory. You have to make those decisions before you ever write any if statements. So writing that test first will help you write better interfaces. Another aspect of that is what I called tidy first. I'm working on a book on software design, and it's called tidy first ? And the question is, I have to change some code and it's ugly. Do I tidy first? And the answer is sometimes yes and sometimes no. And the answer depends on economics and psychology and anthropology and software design and the basic forces of software design, coupling and cohesion. All that stuff comes into that question. So making time in your daily workflow, wherever that comes, making time to make things better for your future self is a good idea. For some reason, programmers seem to be masochistic, right? Programming is painful and it should be painful and I'm tough and I can take it. Oh, well, no. That's one of the advantages of getting older as a programmer is I don't want that pain. I don't want, debugging is harder than coding. Yeah. So if I'm ever coding right at the edge of my ability, when the time comes to debug it, I'm in big trouble. So I would like to avoid that. I want things to be easy, and I'm willing to work very hard to make things easy for myself as a programmer, which is a contradiction, but there you go. That's how it works. So the two things. One is writing tests first. That gives you this separation between interface design and implementation design. And the second one is just making a habit of making your work easier. You see some API and it's hard to call. You don't always fix it, but don't never fix it either. It's like, oh, this is how this should look. All right, so let me go and make this easier for myself and everyone else on my team. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Sure.
Just wondering, can you please name like the major pitfall or the key unexpected result when implementing TCR? Like it's good when it's good, but how it fails? Can you describe kind of horror story?
I don't have any horror stories yet. It is really hard. I didn't code very much because I was kind of bored with TDD. Like I know the workflow, just, writing a bunch more code, like really. TCR really lit a fire because I didn't know what to do next. With TDD, if all the tests are passing, you should write a new test. If a test is failing, you should make it work. If all the tests are failing but the code's ugly, you can refactor or not. That's it. With TCR, I'm forced to work in much smaller steps. Okay, I want to write these 5 lines of code. I know I want to write these 5 lines of code, but writing 5 lines of code and having them go is really painful. So which lines do I write in which order so that the tests always pass and I'm making actual progress as I go along? That's like an intellectual puzzle. It's like programming Sudoku. Remember how I said I would work really hard to make my job easy? This is really hard.
Okay. Let us try to see how it applies to the conference. Unfortunately, the time is limited, and you're going to have to deliver a talk soon. So you might probably need some time to prepare for it.
Oh, thank you very much.
Really sad to interrupt you. Let's try to be incremental and split the thing.
All right, super.
Just, I don't know, git reset hard and see you in 10 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks so much for the great questions.
Thank you, Kent.
Thank you, Kent. Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think, Alexey, Stanislav? Are you going to try this on somebody?
I think yes. Why not? I think we need to do it carefully because we need to think, is it applicable for our project, for our task and so on. But this idea is totally worth of trying, definitely.
So the idea is we probably need to implement TDD first. That is something I understood. So you need to know how to write tests first. You need to make sure the tests are fast, and it looks like it's better be wealthy and healthy than have some illness, right? I'm not sure if it is applicable to a wide variety of projects.
I think it depends because it's kind of a new way of thinking for developer to prepare carefully for every commit or this code will be reverted. So maybe it's a kind of new culture in development, but I think it's really interesting. Maybe, as Kent said previously, it will be interesting for those people who really bored with classical test-driven development, for example. And it's kind of a routine for them. So you can try to use TCR, and it will be exciting and surprising. Maybe a little bit annoying.
More driving.
Yes, more drive.
Give drive in your work.
You know, as Arkady said, in chat, you don't have reverse if you don't commit. So
yeah, it's nice tactics.
So you copy the code in folders and just avoid committing until you are absolutely sure it works.
Vladimir, but seriously, I think it's quite applicable thing for those projects who have a lot of legacy code, for example, who have a lot of tests, and these tests are trying to fail every time you commit something. And for example, we have several hundreds of tests marked as red, and you start thinking how to work with it, how to do it. But in case of TCR, as far as I understand, you will have an answer and you will have a solution. So this bad code will be reverted if someone broke your programming code. It will be just reverted, and you can continue working with the recent successful part. And I think it's a good advantage for some kind and for some types of projects. I think.
Yeah, I think similar. We need to have a good start with TCR. I think we need a new project with big legacy, like with big legacy. Without big legacy, we need a new project with really good skills development team to start this and to try to understand how we can use it, how good TCR for us and for our workflow. And after result, I think we can understand to improve TCR in another our project or think about another.
Okay.
Well, the legacy stuff is kind of puzzling. It depends on the definition of legacy. Someone defines legacy as an application without tests. So if
yes, I agree. Totally agree.
If you have no tests, it probably is not worth investing in TCR from the start, and it's
why not? Why not?
You probably get better feedback or more bugs identified by regular techniques.
I think that when you got a big part of legacy code, you need to deep dive in it, and you need to understand what is going on. And so making tests first will give you an ability to think about it from different angle. So it could be the other way you can go with legacy code. So what is more preferable? I think it will depend on your situation, and many factors, I think, may impact on your decision.
That's funny, because suppose you have a big application, you created a function which you know is fine. However, it calls another pre-existing function, and there is a bug in there. So your newly added code is perfectly fine, yet the whole thing reverts because there was a previous bug which was not discovered because, well, the tests were not there. It might be kind of really annoying. Alexey, I think we don't hear you.
Sorry. As far as I remember, in different types of code or technologies, even test-driven development is not applicable. For example, for web user interface, it's quite difficult to implement test-driven development, and I think TCR is also will be a problem. So it will be a decision up to development team and the whole project team, I think.
Oh, okay, Seven. Nice seeing you back.
Yeah.
I was wondering, did you just revert it yourself?
Yeah. I actually first wrote some tests for myself, and then reverted since they haven't passed. All right, folks. Thanks for this great discussion. Thank you. Special thanks to Alexey and Stanislav from VTB Bank. Thank you for supporting this discussion, and thanks everyone who actually submitted the questions in the Telegram chat. It's really cool to have everyone here. So see you soon, and we do have 1 minute, just 1 minute before the actual talk of Ken Beck, and one reminder, which is really important one. Don't forget, please, to close the tab, current one tab, which you are watching right now, before beginning the next talk. So you have to close this and select the next talk with the card. So that's the way you will be able to watch this. All right, and see you guys. Thank you very much. And Vladimir, see you in 30 seconds then.
Okay, colleagues, guys, thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.